Hey everyone, we're going to be reviewing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie trailer. This is a movie came out in 2005 and is directed by Tim Burton. So I've also seen the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which is the other movie, and that came out in 1971 and it starred Gene Wilder. Now I'm going to be comparing the two just because they're both movies of the same that is actually they're both adaptations of a book that was written by Roald Dahl, and that was the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the book. I think that's what it was called. So let's start. Now I'm just going to be giving my impressions of this film and this trailer. So now the first thing that I remember about this film, and I will say, so I enjoy both films, and I'll tell you more about it later. But right now, one of the things, so this film starts with Charlie. Now, it starts off with this movie trailer starts off with a scene with Charlie and his grandpa, Charlie Bucket. Now, Charlie, it's interesting because for this movie, the original movie, or in 1971, it was called Willy Wonka. But in this movie, they wanted to emphasize, or I should say re-emphasize, Charlie, because in the book, Charlie was emphasized. And from what I read, the author actually didn't like the original 1971 film because they felt like because the author felt like they changed it too much, and the other criticism was that they felt like it was too focused on Willy Wonka. And so with this film, I feel like they're trying to make that correction and perhaps going back to refocusing the story back to Charlie. So now, I mean, we'll see as it goes along. I'm going to talk about how I feel about this. But so for now, in the trailer, we see Charlie and his grandpa. Now, this film, the Tim Burton film, it is, I really love the scope of this film and how big everything is. Now, it all feels grand. The rooms, it almost feels like a video game world because, in video games where they make the rooms so big, and, that decision is made in a lot of video games because one of the reasons why is because it's just easier to do. So rather than measure out, what an actual space looks like, when you're designing a game, especially early games that had to be done manually, it was just easier to make one big block, and a lot of these platformers, they came from that idea that it was just easier to make, if you want to make a big room in a video game, just make it really big and then, that's it, even though it might not necessarily be realistic. And so with this film, I noticed that a lot of the rooms are so big and unrealistically big. And so in a way, it's kind of the fantasy is coming out, right? We see this factory, it's just way too huge. It's too big. It's impractical in how large it is, but almost unrealistically so. But I think they wanted to make it grand. And so that fantasy, perhaps it plays into that fantasy. But that's one thing I appreciate about this movie. Now, going back to Charlie. So let's just talk about Charlie for a minute. So it starts off, this trailer as well as the movie. And I remember the movie, they really made a big deal about Charlie and the family, and we actually spent quite some time sort of introducing and spending time with Charlie. But to be honest with you, I mean, one of the things, this is just my review, I guess, but I feel like I don't know that I actually don't prefer that. I guess what I'm saying is, and I'll just say it now, like, I kind of feel like Willy Wonka should be the main, like, I don't know, like, maybe I disagree with the author, which I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like for the movie, it's too much Charlie. And so I actually prefer, I would have just done away with so much of the beginning. It slows it down. It's too, I don't know, but perhaps I think it would have just been, I would have just shortened it. I would have made it shorter. And to me, because I just don't think it's that interesting, but maybe it's just me. I guess what I'm saying is I don't feel like you have to spend so much time on Charlie to make Charlie sort of important, because we already know that Charlie is the main character. So I feel like we don't have to see, I don't know, we don't have to spend so much time. I feel like this movie kind of gets dragged down. So that's one criticism that I'll have, but it's just my own. But I don't know, what do you guys think? So okay, so let's go back to the factory and how big and how epic this world is. So I like that Tim Burton makes it unrealistic, and how big everything is. The rooms are so huge, and the set pieces are, I would say, almost they're not realistic to me anyway, at least. And I've always felt like this with video games, as we just spoke of. And so to me, I guess what I'm saying is like that's a difference that this movie has, but at the same time it feels epic. And so it has it, and it's certainly one way to do things, right? And so, perhaps, in this world, they want things to be more symbolic. And so they're bigger and not necessarily realistic. Another thing you'll notice is just how clean everything is, which I think is very interesting, because factories are usually dirty, and this isn't a new factory, this is an old factory. So it almost seems a little too clean. Once again, just like a video game world, right? When you see a lot of the video game worlds, they're super clean. Everything looks clean. Everything, when you're playing a platformer game, right? Everything looks clean, right? Especially in the original games. So that this is an example of how, when you build something simple, perhaps they did it for budgetary reasons. But I think, I don't know, but maybe that clean look is something that Tim Burton wanted. And also maybe that's, maybe it adds an element of fantasy to this. And so maybe, just something to point out. Okay, now here we have the Warner Brothers logo, and I will say, like Warner Brothers, they really do a good job with world building. And so this is a movie that I will say, okay, so I'll just say right now, this is a great movie. I do like it for many reasons, which I'm going to go over, but like Warner Brothers, I really appreciate how Warner Brothers with the Harry Potter world and with Lord of the Rings, where they've really taken so much care to rebuild these worlds and to give it the attention that it needs. And I sometimes feel like, not all movies that make epics, or not all movies go to that level, or not all, I should say, not all movie production companies is able to give it that level of attention. And so, okay, so here we see a montage, or I should say, where the golden ticket. So there's a rush to the golden ticket. And this is something that, we see just how Tim Burton, I really like how this movie sort of, there's a lot of symbolism behind this movie. I feel like there is, even though this movie is less realistic and more fantastical, and not just in the fantasy, but also in the setting. And even like, you see the scene in Japan, right? With the kids here in a trailer. It doesn't look realistic. Once again, just like the building doesn't look realistic, this doesn't look realistic. It all seems almost like there's a symbolism behind it. And maybe that's done on purpose. And that it's just an interesting view. And it's certainly, it's something that allows for an extreme amount of color, more things to be able to pop in the screen, even though it's not realistic. But it creates an atmosphere where you feel a rush of emotions immediately. And it doesn't matter when you're watching the film, especially on the first time. I mean, unless you're paying attention, everything just rushes by you. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be realistic. It's almost like a feeling, and perhaps it harkens to how a younger person would experience life anyway, right? A younger person doesn't think logically about things. And maybe from a younger person's perspective, things, the perspective and the points of view are altered. And perhaps maybe that's kind of what this film is trying to show, how what the world is like to a young person that doesn't necessarily see the world and understand the way it does. And so the film itself almost doesn't make sense in a way. Just the visuals, the details, when you pay attention, it doesn't seem logical, but maybe that's intended. Maybe that creates this feeling. And it also makes things look more exciting than it otherwise would be. Once again, another thing too is just how clean everything is, right? We see these kids, they take away all the chocolate bars and it's almost too pretty. They're all lined up in a very clean, sort of white light backdrop on the stands that the chocolate bars are sitting on. And that's just, it's almost too clean. But once again, it's part of the film. I mean, it's something that this film has, which a decision made by the directors and the art director. And like I said, so here's with Charlie kind of opening up his golden ticket. And like I said, that's one thing when I remember watching this film, and I felt like the Charlie scene were too long. Like the beginning part, I felt like it was too long in my view. And so, but that's just me. And perhaps, I don't know. What do you guys think? So here we see the cast. We see Augustus Gloop. We see Charlie Bucket, Augustus Gloop, Violet Beauregard, Veruca Salt, and Mike TV, and so they all have funny personalities. I've never read the book, so I don't know quite how how close they are to how close the films are to the book counterparts, but I do I do like how the characters in this film are. I like how they, once again, they're very clean cut. And one difference I will say between this and the 1971 version is sort of the acting. I felt like the kids were more dynamic in the 71 version, whereas in this one, the kids are not, maybe they're not quite as expressive, or as they're not quite as intense as in the 71 version. And that's one thing that's one difference between this movie and the 71 version. So, but still, the one thing that this film does have is the kind of the humor. They're really good with the humor is great. So even though everything else, they've really captured the humor, kind of these funny little bits. So now here we're seeing Willy Wonka. Now let's talk about Johnny Depp. So Johnny Depp, and I think an extraordinary performance in this film. And so, I mean, first of all, it's a big deal because, for Johnny Depp to do this role, and I'm sure that Johnny Depp, I think Johnny Depp has seen the Gene Wilder version of Willy Wonka. And so to see him come up with a completely different take on Willy Wonka, that right there, that's amazing. I don't know how, like, Johnny Depp, and when you see him, like, in Pirates of the Caribbean with Jack Sparrow, or, just how different the mannerisms and everything, he's able to adopt such a different persona. And it's really amazing. And this film, like, if you had told me, we're going to do Willy Wonka, I could not have imagined that this would be the Willy Wonka. That, like, this is just from Johnny Depp's imagination. And in my view, like, this makes it an extraordinary film. Like, that's exactly what a remake should be. That's exactly what it should have. That makes this film worth it. Like, this is, and as I'm going to make the case, this is a remake done right, because it's completely different. And that's exactly how it should be. It's a different Willy Wonka. And that's worth it, because only Gene Wilder is going to be able to do Gene Wilder. So, to see this, to see that, I'm really thankful that Tim Burton was able to bring together this film with Johnny Depp, because Johnny Depp really, really just created a whole new character, and arguably perhaps even better than Gene Wilder for some people, right? Compared to, depending on what you like. It's at that level. It's different. It's to the point where even if it doesn't necessarily have to be better or worse, because that's going to be subjective, but certainly it's different. It's not like influenced or tinged by Gene Wilder, because so often, when remakes, for some reason, it's very difficult for people to escape from the power and the gravity of the original film. People seem to struggle with this, and this is one of the reasons why remakes usually fail, because they're too influenced by the original film. But in this film, the performance, which Willy Wonka is the most important character, so you have to get Willy Wonka right. And once again, Johnny Depp came to the rescue, and he did make a Willy Wonka that was original, different, and that makes this film worth it. It makes it worth creating, because we're doing something new, and that's a remake done right. And of course, when we see Willy Wonka, like, once again, it's just a different Willy Wonka. His hair, how soft his voice is, but at the same time, he still has to have that. He still has to have a level of maturity to Willy Wonka, to himself, and so this is something that Johnny Depp did a really good job as well, because this Willy Wonka, he looks kind of naive, right? He looks like he could be naive, right? Because he speaks a little softly. he seems like perhaps a younger version, I guess, right? Like if you were to compare to Gene Wilder's look. But the truth is, and he does come off as young to me, but at the same time, when you see when you see Willy Wonka, the Johnny Depp Willy Wonka, you can see the experience that he has, and so it reminds me of sort of Michael Jackson, perhaps, the same kind of style, which is a very clean cut, soft spoken, but at the same time powerful. And I can feel that power that Johnny Depp put to this character. So just because, he's cleanly shaven, yes, so it makes him look youthful, right, as a man, right? But at the same time, Willy Wonka still has power, and he's showing both. So it's not only does he have power, but he has experience. And as we're going to see, when we see the backstory in the movie, you see the backstory of how he created the chocolate. And this is something that I do like about this film, that you see the backstory of Willy Wonka, how Willy Wonka went to the rainforest and captured the chocolate, and then that's how we found the Oompa Loompas, I think. I can't remember the details of that, but it shows you that he's an entrepreneurial person, and that Willy Wonka has experience and has had years of wisdom. And so that's very important for the character to have. And it's something that Gene Wilder certainly put in his character. And in this case, Johnny Depp is showcasing with this character. And you can see that in his mannerisms. Now, one thing that has remained is the sort of the wit. And also there's a little bit of there's a certain level of dismissiveness that Willy Wonka has, but that comes from the confidence that Willy Wonka has. And I believe, the way I interpret it, and I would say this for both characters, but the way I interpret the Willy Wonka characters in this movie is that he's a loving person, but at the same time, he still has to be strict. And so that it's a very unique character, because you don't usually see that, where it's almost like, so on the one hand, yes, Willy Wonka, he kind of seems almost rude in some cases, right? When you see the way he dismisses the children, sometimes it comes off as rude, and maybe it might be rude, but at the same time, there is a lot of love that he's backing it up. And I almost feel like it's hard to say, because we're kind of interpreting, right? Like, why is Willy Wonka being this way? But I think one of the reasons is because Willy Wonka, he's already inviting them into the factory, right? And he's already, in this case, created so much for the world and sacrificed his life to build this wonderful thing, this wonderful creation that people all around the world get to enjoy. And so now, in a way, Willy Wonka has given himself permission to be a little harder, just because, you know what, I've done so much good in this world. I can afford to be a little rude, but it's almost like you almost want to forgive him for that, because of all the good that Willy Wonka has done. It almost creates an exception that, maybe a good person can be a little rough and tough if they're good. But I don't know, like, I don't know how you would interpret that, or how else you can see it. But I mean, think about it. If somebody were, let's say there was a hero and they were rude, but they were, maybe they were a superhero, but then they save your life, or they're saving lives and they're helping people and they're doing extraordinary work. Is the bumping and the rudeness and the, maybe it can be forgiven. Maybe it's not a big deal, and in the case of Willy Wonka, I kind of see that in him, in that, yes, there is a certain level, the snide remarks, the kind of the attitude, I guess, is one of certainty, but that's because it's almost like he's earned it and he deserves it, but also because he is, well, I guess I would interpret it anyway, that he is morally, it's almost as if the message that perhaps the movie is sending is that if you are a morally good person, you can get away with being a little strict. You can get away with going further than somebody who perhaps is not a good person, or who has not earned the sort of, or who has not actually done the work. If you do the work, you can get away with sort of being a leader. I mean, in the way, isn't that what it means to be a CEO? Like, when you think about it, one of the differences, so we're about to meet Veruca Salt, right? Who she's very bossy, right? Now, the thing is, Veruca Salt, right? She hasn't earned her, right? Like, she's too young to have done anything. So in a way, she's being bossy, but has she really earned it? Like, can she really be, like, does she even know what she's doing, right? And so that the bossiness doesn't quite work. But imagine if sort of an older version of Veruca Salt, an older version of Veruca Salt who had a lot of wisdom, would it be okay then if Veruca Salt were bossy? And I would argue that if she was morally good and she was actually outputting and creating value in this world and doing things for the good, it might be okay to be strict and perhaps rude and pushy or whatever, if it's for the right reason, if it's in a good way. So it's almost like, but again, where do you draw the line for that, right? So it's a fine line, but at the same time, it shows you that sometimes in a leader, you might forgive their flaws or their intensity if the leader is the one paying or already, it's almost like the leader has paid, because really they're giving of themselves. Leaders give of themselves. Yeah, presumably, when a leader, let's say in the case of a CEO who has created a company, right? It is through their efforts that they're able to employ others and able to help. So in that sense, if there is a sort of a founding creator, let's say, that happens to be a CEO, that's the example I'm using. So imagine, all of that sacrifice, you might forgive their flaws, because if it wasn't for their sacrifice, perhaps the company wouldn't be. And so, in this case, Willy Wonka, right, he has created so much. And so it's almost like you can get away. I feel like, and this is just my interpretation, I feel like he can get away with doing that because he's doing the good stuff, right? Because he's helping out the world. He has created, obviously, the Willy Wonka chocolates, which are renowned and loved all around the world. So it's, and as we'll see, Willy Wonka is an inventor. So he's an inventor. He's created, and he's constantly creating new products. So, it's almost like you forgive kind of the rudeness that comes from it. And, the rudeness might come from it might be the thing that drives him anyway. Maybe because he spends a lot of time by himself. So, of course, he's going to come off a little rude to others because he's not used to being around others anyway. And so there you see. So that's another explanation for why Willy Wonka might be the way he is. And in many ways, Johnny Depp's portrayal of Willy Wonka, I think, is better in that regard than Gene Wilder's performance, because in this one, he comes off as more closeted, or as more sheltered. More sort of like he's not around a lot of people, right? So he is that weirdness that he brings that weirdness into this character. And I like that, because in a way, a lot of the great inventors and, people who lock themselves up into a laboratory, they're a little weird, right? You're going to be a little weird, and that's okay, right? When you see Olympian athletes, sometimes they're a little weird, but that's because they do extreme things. So here we have, so Augustus Gloop. Now these characters, I will say for this movie, I feel like I prefer the 71 version of these characters, because they feel more realistic. Whereas these characters, I feel like they optically, they look really good on screen. So Augustus Gloop, Veruca Salt, Mike TV, who's the other one? Violet Beauregard. Hope I'm not forgetting anyone, and Charlie Bucket. So they look really good in this film, but I feel like the acting, they're not quite as intense as in the original film. And in a way, there was a more realistic acting style that the original film had that I kind of prefer. And I would say it's not just the acting, but the set design. And so in that regard, I feel like it's just more realistic. Whereas this one's a little too clean. And so in a way, I've talked about how Johnny Depp, he really steals the show with this movie, where it's all about Willy Wonka. If it wasn't for Willy Wonka, I don't think this film wouldn't be the same. And so it just wouldn't be, Willy Wonka, Johnny Depp's portrayal of Willy Wonka makes this film. And I feel like all of the other characters could have been replaced. They don't quite match his level. And in that way, it's weird how Johnny Depp, the same thing happened with Pirates of the Caribbean, where Jack Sparrow completely overshadowed everything else in the Pirates movies. It's almost to the point where that's the only reason why you watch the movie. Like, if it wasn't for Jack Sparrow, perhaps the movie wouldn't even be, it wouldn't be as popular. And in the same way, like this film, I would say if it wasn't for Johnny Depp's, Willy Wonka completely overshadows everything. And so that's one thing that I would have changed. Like, he's too good is what I'm saying. And all of the others, they don't match quite his intensity. And also, but perhaps, the reason why the kids, they're too clean, I guess is what I'm saying. I would have preferred perhaps, I don't know, more acting that's more, I don't know, like the parents, and just something that's more realistic. I feel like Hollywood today, like a lot of the film, now this wasn't made today. This was made 20 years ago, so almost. So this is a pretty old movie at this point. But, culturally speaking, I mean, things have changed actually in 20 years. But, what I would say is that a lot of the films today, in particular, but even around this time when this was made, they were, the emphasis, it's almost like they don't want it to be too realistic. And they would prefer that the kids or that actors, that it's more symbolic. And as we've seen, just that the way that you feel, that it's more clean without actually showing kind of the minutiae, the small details, the little, almost like, because our films, it's almost like we don't want our films today to be too, we don't want them to be, we want them to be kind of idealistic. But when all the movies today try to be that way, there's a certain acting style that I feel has become prevalent. And it doesn't, and when you watch these old movies, you can you can almost feel like they're real characters in a way that I feel like today's characters are not, because because they act too generic, and they don't, and and maybe that's just a reflection of how our society is today. Maybe we're not as dynamic as societies before were. Even, like, for example, like the way they speak, right? Like, how you see, you watch old movies and you can hear, like, it's almost like there's like different accents that just don't exist anymore. And that's the kind of character that is missing in today's world. Like, it's almost like we've lost a piece of, and that's just, and it's not just accents. Like, I think people don't realize, like, I'm not talking just accents, from around the world. I'm talking just in the United States. Like, there used to be many accents, and you can see them in movies, but then you don't see them anymore today. It's almost like we've lost, like the United States has lost sort of a piece of, I don't know, like the accents, and the character is missing. But that just could be that, our society today is just more rounded and, not as detailed as it once was. And also, even like interests, for example, when you see in the original 1971 Willy Wonka movie, Mike TV, the kids, Mike TV, for example, the kid who really likes TV, they were kind of weird. They were weird in a way that I think today they are afraid to be weird. And I feel like in the older movies, everyone was kind of in their own world. Like, they were okay being weird, But in this movie, we only see Willy Wonka being kind of weird, and everyone else kind of seems a little too clean. And so yes, they do have their personalities, of course, right? Veruca Salt with her bossiness, right? And, Mike TV with his obsession with toys. Now in this film, and so you see all of these personalities, the personalities are still there, but I feel like the acting just doesn't, I feel like it's too symbolic, and I don't believe it the same way that I do when I watch the original film. So, it's just something that I know. So here are all the kids introducing themselves. So Veruca Salt is jumping in, Violet Beauregard, Augustus Gloop, and it's really funny seeing how Johnny Depp kind of dismisses them once again. And the performance, it shows you how they really thought. They're very careful with the lyrics, or the lines. This film has extraordinary script, and I think it's wonderful that in this might be a result. This might be influenced by the book itself. I haven't read the book, but in this film, they really do pay attention to the words that are spoken, and particularly Willy Wonka. And in this film, as you can probably tell, I really feel like Willy Wonka should be the main character. So I guess I disagree with the nomenclature of this film, right? Like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like Charlie is too boring, I guess. Like, and maybe it's just me. I don't know. What do you guys think? I felt like the original, the early part of the film, which I've seen the film already, so the film, it's too long. I felt it would have been better if we cut it off, and it would have been better if we had seen more of these kids. Like, I would have preferred more, more Veruca Salt, Augustus Gloop, Mike TV, more of them and less of Charlie. Even though I know Charlie is the main character, but I don't think I'm diminishing Charlie by saying that. I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like we don't need to see that too much Charlie to make Charlie important, or for Charlie to be important. And at the same time, I think this movie would have been more entertaining seeing the other characters, because it's just, I've always felt like this movie was a little weird. I felt like this movie kind of always ends, I guess I'm jumping to the end of this film, but like, it always ends, I don't know, the original movie and this movie, they end strangely. I feel like it's structured in a weird way that I don't know, it's hard. So that's why I feel like we should entertain ourselves with these four children, which it's interesting how these four children in this film, or five children, wait, Augustus, Veruca, Mike TV, is it four or five? Let's see. Yeah, it's five. Five kids: Charlie, Augustus, Violet, Veruca, and Mike. Now, what's interesting is that the four other kids that are along with Charlie, in a way, they are antagonists, right? Even though they're not like bad people, like, they're not villains, but they are sort of they kind of represent, I guess you should say, the things that need correcting, right? They all have their flaws, and this film is trying to, as you will see, when they take on the challenges, they all fail because of a flaw that they have, right? So Augustus Gloop, eating too much candy, right? Or, being gluttonous. So Veruca Salt, is it her greed, right? Or which one is it? And then Violet Beauregard, what's her flaw? She can't control herself. She eats the blueberry. I don't remember. But Mike TV, he watches too much TV. So I don't know. You guys can comment below if you remember. But the point is, they're kind of like the antagonists of the film, even though they're not, I wouldn't say that they're completely wrong, right? Like, I wouldn't say that it's like, I don't think it's like, it's that bad, you know what I mean? Like, yes, they're flaws and characters, and you want to sort of teach a lesson that, of how someone should be, and how you can't, have these characteristics to be successful. And in a way, that's kind of the lesson that is being imparted in this film. I would have liked to have seen more of them. But like I said before, and I think it's interesting to note that, like I said, I think it's interesting how, Willy Wonka is kind of butting heads with each of these characters. And to me, it's interesting because kind of they come at Willy Wonka, and Willy Wonka kind of strikes back in a way. And so it shows, I think, the difference, and this is just my interpretation, but it shows that if you have a virtuous character, you can get away with having these flaws, because at the end of the day, isn't Willy Wonka an expression of each one of these quote-unquote flaws, right? So, Augustus Gloop is gluttonous for having a bunch of chocolate, right? Or wanting to have chocolate. But what about Willy Wonka? He has an entire factory. In fact, he's very wasteful in the way that he does the chocolate, right? So maybe he's the gluttonous one, right? So why, what's the difference, right? And the same thing with Veruca Salt, right? She talks about how she wants things. And it's like, well, the lesson there is, hey, you can't get everything you want. You have to, be patient. But in the case of Willy Wonka, he's built this extraordinary world full of objects, probably more than anyone could want. And in this film is almost fantastically so. And so he's even worse than Veruca Salt in a way, right? Willy Wonka. Same thing with TV. Right, so Mike TV, he gets in trouble, right? So obviously, like, all of these kids, for example, they lack control, and they're not doing things in the proper way, right? They're not following the protocols, and they're not well behaved, right? Which you need. You need to be well behaved and follow directions. But in this case, like, think about Mike TV, right? Mike TV likes games and TVs, but in the same way, Willy Wonka, he's working on TV. So how can you say that Willy Wonka doesn't agree with it when really maybe Willy Wonka likes TVs too, right? Like, maybe he likes it even more. But I think the difference, and perhaps this is how I see it, the difference is that Willy Wonka does it in a way that is virtuous. And because he has control, because he did it through his own work, he put in the effort, he put in the work first, and then he was able to sort of accumulate and reap the rewards of his efforts. And so in a way, and he can get away with being a little bossy, or a little, if he does it in a virtuous way. And I think that's just the way I interpret it, which I think is interesting and that's just how I see it. And so in a way, they're not, they're antagonists, but I feel like in a way maybe not. I think they can all be, they're all young, and they're all able to change. And another thing too, and even though this movie in particular, sometimes it shows, I know that there's a lot of comic actions, and it treats, it's not realistic. In real life, a lot of the things, you wouldn't do, some of the things that they do, right? Like, you wouldn't push a kid through a pipe, you wouldn't push someone through a pipe, right? That's not a safe thing to do. But in this film, we can kind of forgive it. Almost like it's like a cartoon. And I think perhaps maybe the fact that it's not as realistic helps to make this world, even though it's realistic, it's really a cartoon. And so we're able to, and maybe that's another reason why Tim Burton chose to to take the art direction in the way in the direction that it went, because maybe you need that, when you see Violet Beauregard becoming a blueberry, inflating, and you see these kids go through sort of things. You see these young people go through these things that are not realistic. So obviously, the audience needs to, in order to be assuaged and not, in order for it to work, you kind of need it to be a little fantastical so that you believe the kind of ridiculous things that happen, right? That you normally perhaps would be harder to do if the film was more realistic. So that's another reason why the fantasy element is a necessary component of this film. Now, another thing too about this film is that it kind of has a lot of, it almost feels like a movie, or like a music video. There's a lot of kind of montages, and we're going to see this in some of the Oompa Loompa movies or songs that they sing, where they kind of, it almost feels like they're breaking the fourth wall, and it like they're entering another world. And so it's another example of how it's the symbolism. It's more symbolic, this film. And so, now, it's one way to make a film, but it's another reason why, for example, the original film doesn't have scenes quite as jarring, where they're doing things. And I know this film does it, when you see, for example, the Oompa Loompas during the Mike TV section where they're playing in a rock band, and you see them in different kind of, it's really funny, but at the same time it kind of takes you out of the movie. And I feel like that's another reason why that's something that I prefer from the 71 version of Willy Wonka, because it's kind of, you don't get taken out as much. You can kind of believe it a little more, whereas this one, because I don't know, it goes a little too far, I feel, sometimes with it, because it takes me out. But I don't know how you guys how do you guys feel about scenes like, for example, when the Oompa Loompas are doing things, but they're kind of in another world. So they're almost feels like music video sequences. And I guess what I'm saying is it kind of takes me out of the film, and perhaps I would have preferred it if it wasn't the case, if they had just stayed here, because otherwise it kind of feels too fantastical, but it's a little too funny. But that's one thing though that I appreciate overall. Here's our next scene. So one thing I will say, the chocolate factory itself, the river, the chocolate river scene, it is obviously, now this scene in particular looks a lot like the original film, the 71 film, but once again, the scale is so big, and I like it. I mean, it shows just how wasteful Willy Wonka is. But like I said, maybe that contradiction might be part of the lesson that this film is trying to impart, that perhaps you can be gluttonous and wanting things, and you can be bossy, and you can do all that if you're a virtuous person like Willy Wonka is. And at least that's how I interpret it. But and we see this in the chocolate river scene, because this chocolate river scene, it's just so ridiculous, right? It's just over the top. The waterfall looks so big. It looks bigger than, like, in real life. If you were to actually look at the logistics of how to run this, I don't see, like, it would require so much energy, so much cleaning. It's ridiculous how expensive it is to maintain things. And it's weird how it is, like, whether it's water, whether it's grass, right? Like, we're seeing grass, like, it has to be mowed, it has to be, like, everything just, I don't know how, like, life is, it requires so much maintenance. And it's almost, I'm always astounded. And to me, when you see modern society, it's almost amazing to think, like, how is it run? I almost feel like I can't even believe how, when I see, for example, the energy costs, or the energy cost, the maintenance, the upkeep that is required to have a functioning city in modern society, or a functioning theme park, or a functioning hotel building. And it's amazing to me how much money it takes just to run things. And almost to the point where it's like, I don't even know how they're profitable sometimes. Because it just seems so expensive. But obviously they are if they're still running. So, but that's just kind of the magic of life, of maintaining complex human creations. And in this case, that's really what this symbolizes. It symbolizes Willy Wonka's factory represents the progress of humanity, and how complex it is to run things. And we see the Oompa Loompas doing it, but I feel like it would take way more Oompa Loompas to actually do than what we see on the screen. I feel like It's so we take for granted how much maintenance is involved in creating and making run these complex sceneries, and in the case of our real world, our cities, and how and what it takes to run them. I like the scene where Violet Beauregard's mother, Mrs. Beauregard, she's her teeth are filled with candy. Little scenes like that. I think Tim Burton really included a lot of memorable scenes with new memorable scenes with Johnny Depp, but as well as these characters. And that to me, once again, makes this film worth making. Like, it's a good thing that this film is made because this remake is a remake done right. Like, show me new things. And that's exactly what they've done. One thing about this film, and this was present in the original film as well, which is that, well, one more thing that is present with this film is that the parents kind of are, or I should say the child is influenced by the parent. Now, of course, a young person is able to be different, right? They can make their own choices. They don't have to follow the path that the parent does. But, when you're young, you are still influenced by them, whether it be by mannerisms or clothing or style. And so when you are influenced by them, I like how this film, because it brings, it requires a parent and child to come in together. It's an interesting dynamic because you're able to see sort of the child, and then you're able to see how the parent may have enabled the child to be the way they are, right? And so that's what I also think is interesting about this film and the original film as well, or I should say perhaps the original book from Roald Dahl. And it's just an interesting dynamic because when you see parent and child, oftentimes you see parallels. And I don't necessarily think that a child's destiny is to be exactly like the parent. No, like, thankfully we can choose for ourselves, right? And also, vice versa. It works the same way, where sometimes a parent will be one way and the child is completely different, or doesn't follow directions. So it's it's mismatched. It's not exactly the same, but in this film, I think it's interesting how they do happen to match. And so in a way, just like you can see the parent and the child, they're kind of reflections of each other in a way. They happen to choose, I guess, or the way this film is kind of, I like how it shows that relationship that you don't normally see, because you just wouldn't normally you wouldn't have an opportunity to be together doing things in the same way. That it's an unusual contest that Roald Dahl, the author of this book, and it's an unusual contest to have, like, okay, a parent and a kid and a child do something, and it's just not usual. And so but it creates these interesting opportunities to see, like, oh, this kid is similar to the parent, or and the influence and why and how the upbringing could be influenced by who the parents are. So, these Oompa Loompas, these dance sequences, they're ridiculous and over the top, but they're awesome. And really, I actually think in many ways they went above and beyond. And, this is a good opportunity to talk about the music in this film. This is, the original film had amazing music. The Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory had amazing music. But this movie, once again, a remake done right, has original songs, original music, original Willy Wonka. What an extraordinary, and whoever this composer is, these are good songs. It's not just like a generic musical songs. Like, these are genuinely good songs in my view. And they did such a good job with the music in this film. They're all original, all kinds of music, and I really enjoy it. And I think the Oompa Loompas, as they the set pieces, the imaginary set pieces, really as I've said, they are over the top and unrealistic, but at the same time they work so well with the music and the Oompa Loompa dance sequences that it works together. It works. It makes this film great, and it's in many ways there because the original Oompa Loompa song in the 1971 version of the film, the song was pretty good and was iconic, and people recognize it. And so for Tim Burton to be able to create a different version, and in this version, as opposed to the other one, in the original 1971 Willy Wonka movie, they would sing kind of the same Oompa Loompa oompa dee doo, they would sing the same song but with the different characters. But in this film, they went ahead and made new original songs for each character. And so it's even better. Like in that sense, the music writing, they went one step ahead. They went above it, and they created something. It's hard to say which is better, but I would say they're both different and they're both great. Like, this is a genuinely good, I, as someone who, as a music lover and musical lover, I can say that this is a great musical. It's a great musical, and this is exactly how a remake should be. It's completely different, has nothing to do with the original in a way, and that's good. Like, that's how it should be. It makes it worth watching. So Willy Wonka being in the Amazon rainforest. So I remember from the film, I don't remember exactly, but I remember that that's kind of like a flashback moment where they're telling the origin story of how the Oompa Loompas came. And I like that too. They may have gone a little too far, or, I would have liked it if it had been more, I don't know. It's interesting that they showed it, but I don't know. I feel like this movie, it's good that they showed it, I guess, but it may have gone. I think the longest part for me was the Charlie parts. Like, I would have just, I don't know. Like I said, I would have preferred it if they had, maybe it is the right decision to make it Willy Wonka the main, to have him be more of the emphasis, but I don't know. Like, I know in this film they tried to make Charlie, but I still feel like Willy Wonka kind of is a more interesting character, even though Charlie is also, of course, Charlie, I feel like, is meant to represent the audience. It's meant to represent you. And so perhaps maybe that's another reason why we shouldn't see too much of Charlie, because Charlie is kind of supposed to represent us and who we could be, and that, we can be Willy Wonka someday, right? So we can be Willy Wonka. And so in a way, but Charlie's not Willy Wonka yet. Charlie has not has not, had the opportunity, but also, the hope, I think the lesson in this film is the hope that, you can watch this film and you can choose to be a good, virtuous person, a hardworking person who creates amazing things. And maybe you can build a world for yourself just as marvelous as Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. So this boat scene, like, once again, when they're on the chocolate river and they're going down this boat, in this version, they're more fantastical. And, I don't know what it is about, like, boat rides, and they always, for some reason, I noticed that a lot of these CGI sequences that they've been making, whenever they're on a ride, whether it's a boat ride or a spaceship ride, whatever it is, they always make it so, like, too fast and too, I don't know, it's like they go too far with it. Whereas in the original movies, when they had to do things with actual boats, it looked like they weren't using CGI back in the old days. They had to actually build the sets. And so back then it was more realistic. But maybe in a way I felt like that was better because these newer films with the CGI, the boats are going, loop-de-loop and, doing things that a boat wouldn't naturally do anyway. And so it's kind of, sometimes they go, you got to be careful with CGI. So in a way that makes the original films more realistic and more, because they were forced to be realistic. They couldn't just make something completely, they didn't have the CGI back then. And so maybe that is an example of how, I don't know, that's a preference that I have with the original boat sequence with the chocolate river. Now, once again, like a lot of these sequences with all of the kids, they're all going to get rejected, and they're all going to get rejected by, in comical ways. And the way I look at it is a lot of it is just symbolic. And I know this film kind of, each of the rooms, they're so big and so, it's almost too much. Like, they're so imaginative, so, and in a way that works well with an idealistic or a more metaphorical interpretation of these scenes, because if the scenes and if the world building is fantastical, well, then all of the elements within it and all of the characters, they're symbolic as well. It beckons you to interpret it in that way, and asks, and you feel comfortable sort of interpreting it in more imaginative ways. And so that's kind of what this film is inviting you to do. So it works, but at the same time, a lot of these films, it seems a little too ridiculous for me. I don't know. Like, I sometimes, with the squirrel sequence with Rufus Salt, or the TV sequence, all of them, they all seem a little extreme, I guess, but they're comical. Like, sometimes, obviously, like in real life, that you would, it's not realistic, right? Like, you wouldn't actually do some of the things that you see, but a lot of it is because it's, meant to be comical. And I guess, maybe that's why Tim Burton he went out of the way to Tim Burton went out of the way to make it fantastical, so it's a little more clearer for the audience to realize that, oh, it's kind of a fun comedy. It's not meant to be too realistic, and perhaps that's why the jokes need to be there. And so the tone of this film, you have to get it right, because you can't be too realistic. I feel like these are things that, but even in the original film, it's interesting how they still were able to add and keep these fantastical elements. So even though Gene Wilder had a more serious sort of portrayal, and as I've stated, the film itself, the way the acting and everything is a little more true to life in the 71 version of the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory film. But in this film, it takes all of the imagination, or it takes sort of a more imaginative approach. And I like that Tim Burton was able to create that. Once again, using the technology of the time, which incidentally is not that much different than today's. It's crazy how in not much has changed as far as the styling. I feel like this is the kind of movie that would still be made today, and perhaps it is better made maybe it was better made in the 20 years ago, because it was back then, it was fresh, it was very expensive. There was a certain degree of investment into this film for the visual effects. And okay, so we see here, when Mike TV asks, I think it's Mike TV who asks, what is the point of this factory? And then, we see Charlie Bucket explain that, candy doesn't need a purpose, so in a way they're kind of giving away the theme of this movie like that, when they say that sometimes you do something for fun, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, sometimes people don't, if you look at the world, you're trying to conquer the world, or you're trying to, in the case of Rutger Salt, trying to get everything, in the case of Augustus Gloop, trying to enjoy everything, and sometimes, everyone is kind of driven by purpose or a need, but in this case, sometimes, Willy Wonka has monetized fun, so to speak, and really created has created a market, I guess, for fun and for giving joy to people, and it doesn't have to make sense. And perhaps that is also reflected by the movie's settings and how fantastical the set pieces, but also the factory itself is. The only thing that I think is interesting is how the factory from the outside looks like a generic factory, so that is interesting. But everything else that's happening inside is, a reflection of who Willy Wonka is and wants to be. And this film certainly, and you can see kind of the influence of Tim Burton with all of the kind of tangly and sort of gnarling branches and just unique. What I do like is just how colorful this film was, because usually, Tim Burton's films, they're not always known, The Corpse Bride, Nightmare Before Christmas, and other films that he's made, they're usually more of a grayish tone, right? But black and white. But in this film, they really went colorful with it. But I'm pretty sure that Tim Burton, with all of his experience with sort of the darker films, the more Halloween themed films that he normally does, maybe a bit of horror, and that makes it so Tim Burton, it probably helped him in creating some of the angles, the shots, because this film really does, it does have some moments that are kind of, not really scary, but certainly full of tension. And so, you do make use of sort of unusual angles, when they're going up, when they're going up on the pipes, or when they're, floating up in the air, or whether, whatever it is that's happening in this film. I really like how they get really creative, especially with the Oompa Loompas dancing around. A lot of very interesting shots and sequences, and certainly helped by Tim Burton's experience with all the other films that he's made. And so here we see Willy Wonka. This is a montage, a scene of all the things Willy Wonka has done. And it's not just Willy Wonka, the chocolate factory. It's Willy Wonka, the explorer. It's Willy Wonka, the adventurer. It's Willy Wonka, the business tycoon. It's Willy Wonka, the sort of appreciator of life. Someone who celebrates life. And just I really like how this film captures the completeness of Willy Wonka in a way that the first film, the 1971 version, we didn't quite see a full picture like this. But in this movie, I really like how Johnny Depp or how they were able to show all the angles. And I like that it doesn't even need a prequel in a way. Like this film, I like that it had the flashbacks of how Willy Wonka created this factory, because it makes it the film it's more complete in that sense. And I appreciate that, like that this film kind of stands on its own. It doesn't really need a prequel because it has the flashback. And so once again, with Johnny Depp, an amazing performance from Johnny Depp. And I really think, like I said, this film makes the reason why this film works is because the Willy Wonka was able to capture the eccentricity, but the maturity, and at the same time the distinctness of this Willy Wonka. It's different. It's completely different from the original Willy Wonka, and that makes this worth it. Now, if I were to compare this film with the 1971 version of the film, which one do I like better? It's really hard. Like, I'll be honest with you. I mean, Gene Wilder is an amazing actor, right? So they're both amazing actors. Johnny Depp and Gene Wilder. But like, I will say, like, Gene Wilder, I think I prefer. As far as Willy Wonka, it's like I prefer it. I believe it more, I guess. So the Gene Wilder, but I think it's more about Gene Wilder is just so distinct. Gene Wilder is like, Robin Williams. It's just an actor that it's inimitable. Like, you can't copy Gene Wilder. There's a reason why, like, some people, like, you can't just do a Gene Wilder impression. Like, it's not the amount of skill. Like, Gene Wilder is a skilled orator and performer, and like, you cannot easily redo it. And so, that perhaps, that's why it feels, I feel like he did a really good job with Willy Wonka, because he's able to capture that experience, because Gene Wilder himself had extraordinary experience with acting. And so, yeah, so I do prefer it, and I also prefer kind of the actors, the child actors in the 1971 version. I felt like it's more believable. I also felt the way that they made it, the way that the scenes are made. I like them. I feel like the realistic tone of the 1971 film makes. I don't know. I just believe it more, I guess, as far as like a Willy Wonka movie, even though I know that apparently the author, from what I read, the author, Roald Dahl, wasn't a fan of the 1971 version because it had too much Willy Wonka. But I felt like, I don't know, I feel like it works. I feel like this movie should be about Willy Wonka, but I don't know, like maybe. But that's just how I see it. I don't think Charlie needs to be that much of a center, even though Charlie is an important character. But I just feel like he doesn't have to have as much screen time. Now, in this film itself, that doesn't mean, just because I feel like Gene Wilder is more of a Willy Wonka, that doesn't mean that this is not an amazing portrayal, because I still feel like this is a different Willy Wonka. It's not even, like, it's literally a completely different Willy Wonka of its own, and in many ways, I like it. Like, I like, it still stands equal. Like, Johnny Depp is still an amazing actor who's able to stand toe-to-toe in a different way than Gene Wilder. And so in a way, it doesn't become a matter of, well, who's better, but it's more a matter of they're both amazing and they're both different. And so in a way, that makes it very difficult. Now, in this case, of course, this Willy Wonka in 2005, the Johnny Depp Willy Wonka is sort of, as we said, more well-rounded, I guess, because you see his backstory. And of course, the acting is it's just a different way of interpreting it. And I think it works so well. And as an actor and as a performance, it's another amazing performance from Johnny Depp. Just another character that, like, in a way, like, if you were to just judge it by character, perhaps this would be better than the 71 version, just because of how powerful. If you were to just judge it by Willy Wonka by itself, maybe this Willy Wonka might even be a little better. You might argue it is better because it's so much, because he just puts so much more into it. There's so much more backstory and so much more. And I really like I like how different it is, and how, like, there has to be some value put into that. The ability to create something completely different and have it still work. And so that, Tim Burton, at the end of the day, I really feel like he did a good job with, like, this film is, as I said, so even though there are some things that I prefer about the 71 version, this film 100% is a favorite of mine. It's because I still think this film is well, first of all, an amazing remake, but also a worthy remake. Like it's not even a remake. It's almost like its own movie. And I appreciate that they completely went in a different direction and it worked. And I also like that it's so many of the original elements as well. That the music is completely original, which once again, the music being original, like that matters. Like the amount of effort that this film has. Like you can see the dance sequences, you can see all the weird little ideas that were put into it. And so in that sense, perhaps I just enjoy it. I enjoy it almost like, as far as, even though I associate the 71 version of the film with the Willy Wonka, I still feel like this film perhaps is like it's just something else. So perhaps and in many ways I kind of like it better, I guess. Like it's still enjoyable. I love the scope. I love that Tim Burton went so big with this film to the point where there is so much happening as far as the how big the world is, how much the visual effects, the dance sequences, the creativity, just all of there's so much creativity in this film. And in that sense, you can just really tell that they went out of their way to make something. And there were so many moments of largesse and quantity, where a lot of it is like bigger than life. And I really like how it's not just the film and the characters and the setting, but everything kind of tries to be larger than life. And to me, that's, in a way, like, I guess, I mean, if you had to say, like, as a Willy Wonka story, I kind of like the 71 version, once again, because of the strong character portrayal by Gene Wilder and the children's performers, which I think were great in the original. But in this film, I still like it for its own sake, to the point where I almost consider it like a different film. I almost don't even, like, perhaps maybe we shouldn't compare them, because I still love this film on its own. And in a way, maybe I kind of like it better. I mean, I think I might enjoy watching this film more and more than the original Willy Wonka. So in a way, this is like a different, it's almost like I don't know, it's like superseded the Willy Wonka world itself into another world. And so I still enjoy this film, and I still think, like, this is, I've said it again, but like the remake, the way all remakes should be, is like this. All remakes should have this level of care and attention put into it, right? Like, imagine, like, this is how you do a remake. And in a way, it becomes a thing where, like, do you say, well, this is better or this is worse? I don't know. This is great. It's awesome. And it's its own thing. Like, maybe, and so the original film, I think, is a great film, but this one is also a great film, to the point where it's just become, they both stand, they are worthy. It is a worthy sort of, I don't know if you would call it a successor, but it is a worthy interpretation of the film that I think is amazing. And sadly, it wasn't, I don't think it was a huge box office hit, like it could have been. And it's so weird to me that, sometimes it just doesn't match. Like, you cannot, this is the kind of film that's kind of like a bargain bin film, like I've seen it in the DVD section. It's just like a small little, DVD. And the thing is, it's so many films that, especially from the early 2000s, and sometimes earlier too, they didn't always perform well in the box office, but that doesn't mean that they were not amazing films, right? Like, doesn't mean, and this film, in many ways, it's better than, like, a lot of the box office films. Like, this is an amazing film, and to me, it's why I wanted to review it. I think it's a film that has so much creativity and is exactly how you should approach, because it's kind of my philosophy as well. It kind of aligns, not just philosophically. I really like the symbolism behind all of this. And I like it when a director just goes in a direction. It doesn't matter where they go or how. Just they pick a different direction. Just pick a direction and just stay there. And it'll be okay. No matter what you choose to do, if you just pick a direction and stay consistent and stick with the theme, you will create something great. It doesn't matter what it is. And I think sometimes people, they're so afraid when they're making remakes that they cannot escape the original film, because they're afraid either that, well, a few reasons. A, it might be because they're not skilled enough, in which case maybe you shouldn't be making the movie. Or if they are, they're afraid that, or they just don't know. Some people, it almost feels like people don't even realize that they are following the same beat. You need to go by the beat of your own drum, right? But sometimes people are going by the beat of the old drum, going by the beat of what has already been done, and that's become commonplace. And so, just for that reason alone, this film is already an amazing film. Like, it's better than most films, because a lot of films, I feel, in modern times are not even doing that. So this film already is an extraordinary film, much better than your average Hollywood film, just for that reason alone, for the willingness to come out with completely new songs, completely new sequences, completely new concepts. And sometimes people are afraid to do that because I don't know. It might just be also a matter of self-criticism, where people are too afraid to, they think things too much in terms of, well, I don't know if people will like it or not. But the reality is, people will learn to like whatever you do. So it doesn't matter what you do. And I wish that artists would kind of escape and learn to be creative. Like, I think it's better to make something that is quote unquote, it's better to make something that is original, completely original, but perhaps not of the quality that you think it should be. But if it's original, that's better than if you just rehash and do what's already been done. Because if you just redo something that's already been done, or you're afraid, or another thing is, like, people pay attention to, like, what the critics say, or what they think the audience wants. And I kind of wish that we would escape that. And artists really should not be afraid. Because if an artist is afraid, or a creator is afraid of kind of, oh man, I don't know if people will like this, well then you're always just going to be stuck doing whatever the trend is, whatever is trendy today. But really, at the end of the day, a creator and an artist has to be able to just, my philosophy is just pick a direction. Doesn't matter what it is. As long as you're consistent and it's original and you understand what's happening, it'll work. Eventually people will come around and they'll learn to like it. And so many times that's how it happens. And, just for that reason alone, like this film, the more that I'm thinking about it, the more I'm realizing, maybe I do like it more than the original, just because of the creativity, even though the original was creative as well. But like, it's just so hard to say, because really, at the end of the day, this film is so good, is what I'm saying. Even though, yes, the original, the 71 is good, but this film is also good. And the Gene Wilder performance is, amazing because it's Gene Wilder. But, maybe this one, you could argue that maybe Johnny Depp's Willy Wonka is better, because you can see that Johnny Depp really put effort into this. Like, you can tell that Johnny Depp, he didn't just, he did this. He put the reach. He went out of his way to create and be something that I don't think he is this way, right? Or maybe there's some elements of himself in this, but, in many ways, he went out of his way to create a completely new persona. And whereas Gene Wilder was more acting like, Gene Wilder. So perhaps, I don't know, perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe this Willy Wonka should be given more credence and should be celebrated more, just because of the amount of effort that Johnny Depp went through to make this character, who's completely different. And it's weird, because now, when we think of Willy Wonka, I would say that the Johnny Depp is probably the more influential one today, which I think is interesting. But yeah, that just shows you the power of this Willy Wonka. So and the power of this Tim Burton film, that this film still is able to influence what is happening, and almost to the point where I would say that people associate Willy Wonka with this film more than they do the original sometimes. And part of it, but the other reason why, though, is I feel like part of it is just because it's so hard to imitate Gene Wilder. You don't just imitate Gene Wilder. Does that make sense? So, and that might be part of the reason as well. So, but I don't know. Like, either way, they're both extraordinary films, but this film, what's amazing about this film is that this film made an attempt to remake, or I should say, do another version of an already beloved film with an extraordinary actor. And you know what? this film, I think, succeeded in doing an amazing remake, and Johnny Depp absolutely succeeded in creating a new Willy Wonka that is genuinely new, to the point where, and it's interesting because I've seen people kind of do Halloween costumes of this Willy Wonka, the Johnny Depp Willy Wonka, and it's just such an interesting character, and in many ways it deserves celebration. This is genuinely a great film on its own, and so in a way, I don't know. When you have two films, it's hard for me to say which one is better, like overall, right? I'm going back and forth. They both have elements to it that I like. Now this one's, the 71, a little more realistic. I feel like the characters, I like them a little more, the individual characters. But in this film, I also appreciate sort of Willy Wonka, how different it is. I really like the differences. This is just a perfect example of how a remake should be, where it should, don't be afraid to live your life and do your art the same way that Tim Burton did this film. That's kind of a theme of this film to me anyway. That's how I feel like when I watch this film. I think to myself, you know what? You should be inspired to create an original soundtrack, original story, all of it. I really like how this film, at the end of the day, is a celebration of creativity, and it doesn't just do it, but it puts it into practice. They talk about creativity, but they did creativity as well. And so perhaps maybe in that sense, this film is better just for that reason alone. Maybe it is better than the original Willy Wonka, just for the fact that they went out of their way to create different. They went out of their way to create a different an interpretation, but they were creative about it. It's about creativity and the celebration of creativity, and the way that they did that is by practicing the creativity, right? So they didn't just straight up copy the Gene Wilder performance. They didn't just straight up copy the music sequences or the Oompa Loompas or anything. Like, they changed everything about it, and so in a way that is the perfect embodiment. The film itself is an embodiment of what the theme is trying to say.